Hey you guys, this is our promo before our main show. I wanted to make you aware that we have an amazing YouTube channel which features some of the great behind the scenes footage from our main podcast, as well as some amazing other new content as well that we've got coming up as well with some of our speakers, some of our amazing, I suppose, influencers and also sports personalities and Olympic athletes from around the world. It's great because you can sit down with a pen and paper. If you're extremely busy, you can make some golden nuggets just from a video. And you know what? It's great to connect with someone and see someone face to face by watching the YouTube channel. So listen, guys, go to youtube.com/Adam Strong. Make sure you subscribe to that YouTube. In fact, do me a favor, pause this audio right now, go straight to the YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to us and we'll see you there. Take care. Bye.
This is the Game Changers Experience. Deep dive conversations with leading business disruptors, Olympic athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and influencers from around the world. This show will teach you insights about the winning principles in mindset, productivity, marketing, branding, entrepreneurship, business strategy, and more. Hosted by Productivity Authority, business strategist, former elite athlete, author, and public speaker, Adam Strong.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Game Changers Experience podcast with myself, Adam Strong. And today we have another fun-packed show. We are joined on the show with Cameron Chalmers. And Cameron is a 400-meter, 4x400 relay sprinter that represents Guernsey as well as Great Britain as well. And he's got a fantastic story that he's going to be sharing with us. So, Cameron, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So, I know that when we were speaking off air, actually, and you know, interesting enough, because you're also junior champion as well, under 23 in your discipline, okay, 400 meters. And there was a point in your career where you live, which is on the island of Guernsey, which for the benefit of the listeners, Guernsey is basically one of the Channel Islands of the UK. You were offered a very lucrative career opportunity. I believe it was with a law firm or something like that. And you turned that down to move into, I suppose, fulfill your potential in the athletics realm. Tell us about that and how you kind of went through a stage of kind of, you know, do I do this? Do I not do this? And what was the big attraction in athletics for you?
Yeah, I mean, some could say I sort of fell into the sport slightly. I only took it up seriously when I was 16. And that really was off the back of doing school sports day. I sort of got roped into doing the 400 meters every year. And pretty much every year I broke the school record on sports day. And it was just one of the toughest days. I'd really dreaded it every year because it was so painful. And yeah, when I was 16, I decided, you know, actually, I really want to take my football more seriously. So during I thought, you know, what, go down and do some sprint training, you know, and get in the gym. And, you know, one of the local coaches sort of picked me up and sort of offered to help out that summer. And, you know, I started running really quick. You know, it kind of went from there. And I very quickly realized I was a lot better at 400 meters than I was ever going to be at football. And, you know, I think you enjoy the rapid progression you get when you first start anything, you know, and you're seeing results come in sort of thick and fast for the hard work. So that was very attractive to me. And, you know, went from there sort of 2 years down the line. And as you say, it got to a bit of a crossroads where it was, you know, whether I go into the workplace. In Guernsey, there's a big finance industry, and I was offered a job at one of the big four accountancy firms over here. And it was a bit of a toss up between doing that, which was obviously you know, had its own attractions for different reasons, or going to the University of Bath to really pursue my athletics and, you know, see how far I can take it. And you know, I'd run quite fast that summer, and I'd got my first Great Britain junior vest. I remember speaking to our parents and a few people and thinking, you get a short little window in your life to really have a go as an athlete. You know, you've got the rest of your life for other things. So yeah, why not go for it? And you know, so glad I did.
Nice, very cool. I was going to say, you mentioned in your dialogue then, and you know, and being an elite athlete, and I'm just kind of, you know, I suppose putting myself in your shoes. Obviously, I'm a little bit older than you right now, but back in the heyday, I guess, you know, the importance of self-belief as an athlete, right? What are some of the rituals and habits have you learned or mastered over the, you know, the, I guess the period of time as you been an athlete and stuff? What is there any rituals or habits that you can share with the audience that you do to create or build up your self-belief levels?
I think you know, whether it's athletics or whether it's, you know, whatever you're doing with your life, I think something I've learned over the years of doing this tough event and tough sport is that you know, it's never a smooth straight line to success, as cliche as that sounds. And it really, you know, when everything's going well and smooth, you know, you think it's easy and you almost start to take it for granted a little bit. And then, you know, within a split second, you can tear a muscle or, you know, catch a cold, and then your whole world, you know, just comes sort of crashing down, and you know, reality comes at you fast. And I think it's in those moments you have to, you know, really, I think looking back now, you know, just reassure yourself. And as you say, you know, a big thing with self-belief there, that, you know, you'll be all right. You got, you know, usually you have loads of time, and you've got loads of work behind you, and you don't lose it all overnight. And, you know, you just need to trust that, you know, there will be better days around the corner, you know, and your goals are still there to, you know, to be achieved. I think you just, yeah, you need to, that's I think the real test of character is when it's not going well. Anyone can ride the wave when it's all going smooth and, you know, it's all great, but it's in your tricky moments you need to trust in all the hard work you've done, and that's when you sort of really need to be disciplined, and keep your head on and know that, you know, you'll get there, but it's, you know, it can't all be smooth. But I've always, a quote that someone said to me, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. And, you know, I think that really resonated with me because I've always found I've learned a lot, you know, again, a bit of a cliche, I've learned a lot more from the troubling times or the tricky times than the easy times. And you can take that on year by year and build up your sort of repertoire of experience and knowledge. And, you know, so when something else does go wrong, you think, oh, you know, it's fine, I'm not panicking, I've been here before, and I know that, you know, I'll get it right, and things will come good.
That's a good point, actually. You know, you know, I know that you have certain. I mean, actually, it's a better question. What would you say your typical training day would look like? I mean, you know, average training day. What would it look like, and things like that?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you sort of more an average week, and that would be sort of three. Speaking reasonably broadly here, but 3 gym sessions, considering of, you know, weights, circuits, core conditioning, things like that. And then 3 main running sessions a week, which obviously vary drastically for what time of year you're in. You know, sort of in winter training, if you like, sort of when there's no competitions around, tend to sort of build up a bit more of an aerobic fitness base, and then sort of work into the speed endurance stuff. And then when it's sort of summertime and you're in season or approaching races, then you sort of do a lot more of your fast race pace work and speed training. You know, and then around that, it's really managing recovery is huge, because the toll it takes on your body, you know, week in, week out, and year on year, you know, is a lot. It's especially in the 400 meters, it's not, you know, it's not an easy event by at all. It's probably one of the hardest. So I think, you know, whether that's stretching, your nutrition, hydration, sleep, you know, getting treatment, finding an osteopath or a chiropractor or a physio that works for you, knows your body, and can keep you in the best condition you can be. One of the biggest things is avoiding injury, and not breaking down, because then obviously you're going to lose weeks and weeks, and you're going to have a weakness there that when you have had a niggle, it's not as strong as it has been obviously in the past. So managing your body is big.
Yeah, recovery is so underestimated when it comes to training, isn't it? And I think, yeah, it's terribly underestimated, I think, in not just athletics, but even running a business and being an entrepreneur. I think that you really need to, you really need to look after yourself, not just by building a business, of course, or putting in the physical training like you do. You've got to look at it from all aspects of life, don't you?
I think so, yeah. And you'll last a certain amount of time, whether it be burning the candle at both ends or just hammering it, the more the better, the harder I work, the better I'm going to become, and you'll see results probably initially, but then I think if you're not taking care of everything else that goes on around it, or your foundational things, then very quickly it can come crumbling down, and you find yourself in a worse position than you would have done, just sort of sometimes hanging back a little bit, stopping to just sort of recover, or assess where you're at, and sort of just make smarter and wiser decisions. And I think that comes with experience, and as I say, when things do go wrong, you sort of start to learn your limits and know what actually is a more a better decision, just to sort of hang back a little bit and take it easier.
That makes complete sense. You mentioned about well, not now, but off air, you've also mentioned the importance of developing a team around yourself and surrounding yourself with those team members. How important is it to develop a team for your own personal success, and what do you look for in good team members? Do you pick your own team members, or is it the coach's decisions? I mean, how does that work?
I just think over the course of I've maybe been doing this sort of 5 or 6 years now, and over the years you sort of you obviously come across a lot of people, meet a lot of people, and I think whether it be obviously your coach is one of the people you see pretty much every day, so he's at the forefront of that team. I've got some of my old coaches, they're still very much in my corner, if you like, and happy to offer advice, whether over the phone or I still see some of them, I catch up with them over a coffee here and there, and then it's people like your sort of medical team, that finding like I said, a physio or an osteo or a sort of deep tissue masseuse that really works for you and keeps your body in a good place, and then sponsors who financially keep you sound and allow me to train full time. It's it's overlooked, because I think that being able to be a full-time athlete is a great luxury, and it's not only an amazing way to spend my life, or this decade as I am in my 20s, doing this, traveling around the world, training, with my mates, and the places you get to see, it's unbelievable. But you can only do that if you've got money coming in, and I'm very fortunate to be on national lottery funding through British Athletics, and then I've got some private sponsors from Guernsey, such as Ravenscroft and Artex, who look after me. And there's little things on the side, so, like I've got training partners over in Guernsey with me for this winter in the COVID situation now, and King's Health Club have just agreed to help all 4 of us out this year for training, so we can use their facilities. And
Sweet.
So it's I think it's very important. People say, oh, I'm going to go it alone, and all this sort of lone wolf malarkey, but I think really, I think successful people tend to, that there's a lot of people that have helped them on the way, whether it's even just a small piece of advice or year on year support in many different ways. and obviously I could never forget my parents, who are just there for anything and everything, they can the whole way through.
Very cool. Based on our conversation, you seem really quite a very, like a very humble person. You seem kind of grounded. You seem fairly happy. Because for most people that turn down a big job in a big accountancy firm, right? Most people would take it, but you decided to kind of go the opposite way. But from your experience, how important is happiness to you? And what have you found? What are the correlations between, I suppose, directly to happiness and performance for you?
I'd say I'm reasonably emotionally led, in my decision making. I think happiness for me, I think you sum it up well, is pretty much at the forefront of, most decisions I'll make and the routes I'll go down. As you say, really it was, I went with my heart on the athletics decision over going straight into the workplace. And I just think, if you can be happy, ultimately that's what life is about. You go beyond sport and business, and if you're happy, then I think ultimately that's why you're doing all these things, like sport, and it sort of dictates everything you want to do, whether that's to get money so you can do nice things that make you happy. So I feel very fortunate to be doing this, like I say, because it does make me happy. I'm doing what I want to do with my time instead of spending my 9 till 5 doing something I don't really enjoy, just to have a bit of extra cash to do some things I can squeeze in over the evening that sort of make me happy, and you sort of maybe perhaps trying to make up for it. So yeah, I think it's a great point.
Interesting actually, Cameron, because I think one of the things that I see right now, and even some of our listeners, right, is we sometimes do something for the wrong reasons. Do you know what I mean? So, you've highlighted about the fact that, you're into athletics because you're passionate about it, and you're happy and content doing it. But, some of our listeners, which are business owners, entrepreneurs, even employees, right, which maybe are not at that place, and they might have an excuse of, oh, but I've got bills to pay, or I've got this to do, or whatever it is. Any advice for those people that are just kind of what I call a cog in a wheel? Do you know what I mean? And just going with the times and whatever it might be. Any advice for people like that?
Yeah, I think, look, I'm under no illusion that I'm very fortunate to be in the position I am at the moment. I'm still aspire to, run even faster and go even further. But I do appreciate that, there's times where you are going to have to do things you don't want to do, that don't necessarily, everything I do doesn't necessarily make me happy. And, that's the same as anyone in business. I'm sure, sometimes you have to, play the game a little bit, or, do those tough or long hours, or, put yourself in a tricky situation and take a risk, that, long term might pay off in terms of, a big reward, and happiness down the line. So I think it's trying to weigh things up, logically and rationally, and sometimes, yeah, you do have to look long term. It can't just, if you go through your life just purely basing every single decision off happiness, then again, it's a little bit the sort of the similar to what we said about just working hard with, blindly having at it. And I think eventually you sort of might come unstuck, because, sometimes you do need to sort of put some perspective on things and, look at the bigger picture.
Agreed. I know that a lot of people are going through tough times at the moment, especially, we've got a diversity of different listeners, from entrepreneurs, business owners, even aspiring sporting athletes, or whatever it is. But from your perspective, okay, now this is a really interesting question from me, as how do you develop motivation? And any advice for our listeners that I suppose are not in a great place? And it's a bit like going on an emotional, I suppose it's a bit like going on a roller coaster, right? We have good days, we have bad days, but how do you get motivated? And I suppose in a way, what keeps you going?
Yeah, that's a great question. And something that I've had to addressed myself, you know, in the last year, especially with the way things have gone this summer with the Olympic Games being cancelled. You know, I've had my eyes on that for, you know, half a decade now, all sort of gearing towards that, and it didn't happen. I think motivation is a great thing when it's there, but motivation does come and go, you know, and anyone will tell you that, you know, some days they feel really motivated and then other days, oh, not so much, you know. So I think that's when you really need to actually sort of bring yourself back to discipline, and have a look at your goals long term. You know, and the days you aren't feeling motivated, you just, yeah, you need to rely on your self-discipline, and, you know, really ask yourself, like, is this, you know, what is going to help me today, get that little bit closer to my sort of long-term goals. You know, and I've had my phone background for the last however long I can remember as being the Olympic rings. You know, there was a qualifying time I wanted once, and I stuck it on my door. You know, so every time I, you know, go into my bedroom, I see, you know, I see that time. You know, and after a while, you almost don't see it because you're just so used to seeing it there, but subconsciously you see it. And you know, I think that's where goal setting and having something that you know you really want to drive and work towards is so important, because you know, yeah, the motivation does fluctuate, but if you've got a firm goal you want to achieve, whatever that is in business or in sport, then you know, if you really want it, you'll make it happen.
Very cool. What do you do to get out of your comfort zone, I suppose? Because, you know, comfort zone can mean so many different things to so many different people, right? But what do you do to get out of your comfort zone? And any advice for some of our listeners that, you know, they like, you know, society these days like to stay in this kind of comfort zone. You know, they don't want to, you know, they don't want to go out of the whole kind of comfort zone. They want to feel safe and secure and whatever it is. But I mean, what do you do to get out of the comfort zone? And any advice for people that that, you know, that don't want to kind of, I suppose, go into uncharted territory and maybe explore other options?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, because I think it creeps up on you. I think by the time you realise you're in your comfort zone, you've probably been there for a substantial period of time, because you know, because you are so comfortable, and it's, I think it's what most people, you know, sort of crave really, is to feel that way. You know, but it gets to a point where, you know, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got in some respects. And I think, you know, it's, for me, I like a challenge. You know, I keep a training diary and I know what times I've run for certain distances and sessions, you know, in the sort of previous years. And I know that, you know, ultimately, if I want to improve and I want to run faster, then I'm going to have to be topping those times, whether it's in the gym, in the weight room, or whether it's on the track sprinting. So, you know, there's sort of small, you know, little personal targets, you know, sort of throughout the months and throughout the year that I have. I want a new personal best in my, you know, my power clean in the gym, you know, or my 300-meter training time, you know, or things like that. You know, and anyone likes trying to beat a high score, or, you know, achieve something they've never done before. And I think you get a real buzz out of that, which, you know, is a far better feeling than comfort. You know, it's just, you've got to work hard to get to that feeling.
Yeah, no, definitely. Have you, in terms of, because we have a lot of amazing listeners, what have you found? What have you found in particular? Any the correlations between, I suppose, athletics and running a business? I mean, I know that you don't have any experience in running a business, but what do you think are some of the skills and attributes that maybe some of our listeners can take away from you that then they could go away and practice?
Yeah, it's I think there's definitely, you know, a good crossover between you know, the skills that make a successful sports person, or just a successful person, you know, in any walk of life really. There's a lot of skills that you do pick up and learn, you know, and you get to meet some very sort of established sort of, you know, people who have done amazing things, and, you know, take a page out of their book. So, you know, I don't pretend to know anything about running a large successful business or anything like that, but you know, I think as you say, about self-belief, was very important, because it's not always going to be a smooth line to success, and thinking long term, and then, yeah, really making it clear what you want to achieve, setting yourself some goals, as basic as this sounds, it's cliche and basic for a reason, because I think, it will ring true. If you keep chipping away at it and you sort of make every day a sort of slight step forward, towards those goals, then you're going to get there eventually. And I think it is just about sticking with it. And if you really want something, I think you will find a way, to achieve it.
Yeah.
So
very cool.
It's working that out in each sort of individual circumstance.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you've had numerous coaches and mentors, in your career and stuff. And I mean, for me, I see coaching, or a really good coaching is as important as oxygen, But from your perspective, when you look for a coach or a mentor, you go out seeking those, people as such. What do you look for in a good coach in terms of, like, being able to improve yourself and take it to the next level?
Yeah, I think often you look at what they've done with other athletes in the past. Whether are they successful? To start with, because I think you want to be around other successful people, and if they've taken a sort of similar athlete to you, or someone in your discipline, to the levels that you aspire to, or they've even done that themselves as an athlete and now they're a coach, then there's that understanding of, well, they know what it takes to get to that level. And I think that's important, that for me, that a coach can almost relate to how hard it is, and ultimately understand the event and know the specific needs of of what it is to get to those goals that I've set myself. And I think a coach that listens to you, as well as knowing, having all the knowledge and setting a great program. I think not everyone's the same, so I think it's important that it's not just some military approach of one size fits all kind of thing. I think there's I've got a lot of time for a coach that although sometimes I need to be told, and we just need to go with it, that other times actually I can pull them aside and be like, look, coach, I think I need this today, or I'm feeling tired, I think we need to back off. And I think my coach, who I'm with now, Matt Elias, he was a 400 hurdler. He's been to an Olympic Games. He's running 4x400 meter relay teams for Great Britain. He's been very good. I think I actually expected him to be a little bit more gung-ho and, get after it, lads, come on, get up, pulling us up off the floor. Well, we're being sick on the side of the track because, we're working so hard. But actually, at certain times of the year, he surprised me by actually holding us back sometimes. I think people often think of the coach standing there shouting at you, to work harder. But actually, sometimes it's very important to have a coach that will actually pull you back, because as athletes and competitive young men, I think the tendency is to just go harder, or work harder. So I think sort of having some extra experience on the sideline to know when that's just not worth the risk, basically, is valuable.
Very cool. Conscious of time, because I respect that you're extremely busy, and I know that you want to get back to training, but what would you say is some of the best advice that you've ever received in your career so far?
Yeah, that's a challenging question. I think really there's no sort of single piece of advice that anyone's given me that's that really, really sticks out. But I think I've had such a wealth of great advice from meeting so many people. I think really, just year on year, you learn so many things, and each year you sort of finish the season, you think, oh, I've got it now, I know what I'm doing. And the next year, you're whether it's on a warm weather training camp, you end up spending 3 weeks with, an Olympian who's run a second faster than you. You can pick their brains and learn little things, or whether it's just messaging someone and them picking up the phone. One of my sort of almost guys that I really aspire and respect is Ewan Thomas. He's the 400-meter record holder for Great Britain, and he's been more than happy to help me. Over the phone, I've chatted to him quite a few times and met him in person. And just trying to almost, in some respects, learn from other people's mistakes who have already been there and gone through it. And try and take as much advice as you can and apply what is, what you can actually use to your own training. Because not everything you hear and not every piece of advice will, you can't relate everything to your situation. But I think it's working throughout the years, picking things up, whether it's making a note of them mentally or writing it down, and each year trying to apply more and more of those things that you pick up to your training to just, make your career as good as possible.
Very cool. Very good. I think you've given us some great advice. I hope that you guys have taken on a lot of great advice from Cameron, because I think that and the reason I've kind of been looking away as well, because I've been writing notes. I'm a big note taker, you see, Cameron, when it comes to just listening to people's content and people's opinions and stuff, and and try to apply it to me. And again, for you guys, if you're listening in, by the way, if you're listening to it in the gym, if you're listening to it in the car, or just generally listening in your lounge, make sure you got a notebook and pen, because at the end of the day, there are just some amazing little golden nuggets that you can take away from these amazing interviews. Anyway, Cameron, listen, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on the Game Changers Experience podcast. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
So guys, listen, hope that you've enjoyed today. And what I was going to say, we'll see you in the next Game Changers Experience podcast. Take care and have a great day. Bye-bye. Hey, you guys, I just want to say thank you so much for listening in to this episode of the Game Changers Experience. I hope that you got some amazing value, some great insights, and golden nuggets that you can implement into your business straight away. I would really, really appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review on the button below. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.